afternoon. My name is Shane Spector, and I teach evidence to several of you in this room. And next year I'll be teaching first-year torts, about which I'm very excited. And I'm here today to talk to you about how to get a job you'll really like. I'm also a practitioner. I'm a trial lawyer in Philadelphia at a firm called Klein and Spector. And I thought a lot about the issue of getting a job you'll really like. Because, let's face it, your professional satisfaction is absolutely key. It is, or should be, an irreducible, non-negotiable minimum for you. Being happy in your job is at the core of your happiness in general. And you all have worked way too hard and spent way too much money and way too much time to get to the place where you are, only to perhaps be unhappy in where you end up after you leave here. So I'm going to talk to you today about how to get a job you'll really like. And I want to begin by talking about some survey research that was undertaken a few years ago, and there is an article that appeared in the ABA Journal in November 2010 called "Are You Happy Now?" And I want to talk about 5 questions and answers that appeared in that story and get your sense as to what you think are the correct answers, and then talk to you about the correct answers and what they mean with respect to a job search. So let me begin with the first question, which is this. The National Opinion Research Center at the University of Chicago surveyed workers in 198 occupations, asking whether they were very satisfied with their careers. Among the professionals surveyed were lawyers, doctors, accountants, clergy, and teachers. Lawyers, doctors, accountants, clergy, and teachers. What is their ranked order of self-described professional satisfaction? Lawyers, doctors, accountants, clergy, teachers. Who are the happiest? Who do you think? Clergy. I hear a lot of clergy. Anybody want to offer a view other than clergy? Teachers. Anybody want to offer a view aside from clergy or teachers?
Lawyers. Accountants.
Is that a serious answer?
Yeah.
Okay. So how many say clergy? Raise your hand, please. How many say teachers? How many say accountants? Okay. And does anybody want to vote for lawyers as? Okay. How about doctors? Okay, so the answer, the answer for the most satisfied, self-reporting, would be clergy. Second would be teachers. Third, doctors. Fourth, lawyers. Fifth, accountants. That doesn't mean, by the way, that you're wrong. It just means the accountants are wrong. So, why do you think that is? Why do you think that clergy self-described as being the most satisfied? And why, by the way, did a majority of you give that answer? You already knew it, didn't you? You didn't have to have me tell you the answer. Most of you knew it was clergy, and most of those who said it wasn't clergy said it was teachers, and teachers is second. So why? Yes, why do you think?
For clergy, perhaps there's a sense, or we had the assumption, perhaps correct, that people who are going into that profession find it intrinsically meaningful. And that meaning is something that really, sustains them even when stuff's hard.
Yeah, but I hope that you law students feel that the law and your eventual practice will be intrinsically meaningful. I mean, I know I feel that way about the law. I think it's intrinsically meaningful. So I wonder whether something else could explain professional satisfaction. Yes, sir.
Would it be like how much debt people have? I don't know how much not in debt, but like lawyers probably have a lot of debt. I don't know about accountants, that might be an anomaly, but.
Yeah. Well, I would suppose that doctors would have the most debt, and yet they're third, and perhaps lawyers would have second most. they're fourth. Clerics, many of them take an oath of poverty. So while they don't have debt, they have an additional financial pressure. Anybody else want to offer a suggestion about this? Yes?
I think it could be like, is what you expected going in the job the actual job you're performing?
Differing expectations as compared to what you experience. And we're going to get to one of those questions in just a moment. That could be a reason. Anyone else want to offer a view? In the back.
I think that the values that someone in the clergy, their values align with the work that they're doing every day.
Values aligning with work. Anyone else want to offer a view? What about teachers, though? I mean, a lot of you said teachers, and teachers is second. Yes?
This might just be because I'm a very extroverted person, but the first three of those tend to be people who are really like client oriented. If you think about, like clergy and parishioners and teachers and students, there's a lot of interaction.
Human contact. Yes. That does seem to be a unifying characteristic to the answer. Accountants may have the least amount of human contact. They're working with spreadsheets and financial statements and numbers and the like. And doctors have a lot of human contact, maybe even more than lawyers, and maybe that would be why they're ahead of lawyers. And certainly teachers and clergy have a tremendous amount of human contact. You notice, by the way, that money doesn't seem to be related to the answer here, does it? The clerics and teachers would appear to be earning the least, yet they report the highest degree of professional satisfaction. So let's go to the next question, and that is, there's something called U.S. News and World Report. Ever heard of that? And they place American law schools into 4 tiers. If you've heard that. With the first tier schools being the most highly ranked, I think we knew that. Lawyers who report the highest levels of career satisfaction are graduates ranked in which of the 4 tiers? Which of the 4 tiers graduates report the highest degree of professional satisfaction? Who says first tier? Please raise your hand if you say first tier. Okay, I notice there are no hands that are raised. And that is very disconcerting to me and should be disconcerting to you. In fact, it should be even more disconcerting to you than it is. How can it be that you're all going to a first-year law school, yet you think that your peers, if not you, will not report the highest level of professional satisfaction of any of the graduates of any of those 4 tiers? Yet presumably you work very hard to get in here and you achieve greatly to do it. And also, just given generalized market forces, you probably have the greatest accessibility to various jobs. And if you think professional satisfaction is important to you, at least superficially, you'd have the best chance of getting a job that would make you happy. Yet, none of you select first-tier law school graduates as being the ones who would be the most professionally satisfied. So I'll skip over that first tier and ask about this. How many of you think second tier is the answer? Quite a few. How many of you think third tier is the answer? Less, but still quite a few. How many of you think fourth tier is the answer? I see no hands in the air. The answer is fourth tier. Fourth-year law school graduates report the highest degree of professional satisfaction of any of the 4 tiers. And in fact, when you get into some of the underlying data, only 27% of graduates from top 10 law schools say they are very satisfied with their career choice. What do you think might explain why 4th-tier graduates report the highest levels of professional satisfaction? And a second question related to the first question, why do you think none of you chose first-year law schools? Yes?
I just had a clarifying question. When referring to the 4th tier, is that only people who took JD required jobs, or is that everyone who graduated from a 4th tier law school? Because I think that would change how I feel about it. Just because there are a fair number of people who go to the schools
Well,
who don't.
as phrased,
Yeah.
I would say that it's JD required jobs, because it says lawyers who report the highest levels of career satisfaction are graduates of which tier law schools. So it would seem to be that category. Does that help you in answering the question?
Yeah, I mean, I guess perhaps if you're in a class, I mean, I'm thinking really like unaccredited law schools, but if you're in a class of people where some people maybe don't even get a legal job and you get a legal job, then maybe you would be really satisfied because you're excited to be employed in the legal industry. I don't mean that, and I like really mean no offense by that at all. But,
Yes, yes.
based on the data.
So is that a sense of are you sort of saying expectations being satisfied? It's hard to get a job coming out of a fourth-tier law school, and so if you get a job, you're happy because you got a job? Is that what you're suggesting?
Maybe. I mean, I would say expectations are maybe why no one thinks the top tier is satisfied.
Yeah. But on the answer that you and I have worked toward, if that were true, that might explain why somebody would be satisfied for, let's say, a day or a week. But after that, I would think that people would then be assessing their job, whether they like their job, or whether they find it satisfying. And that would be the determinant as to whether they would answer that question, yes, I'm very satisfied, or I'm satisfied with my job. So I don't know I know that having a job by itself really gets us to the answer. Yes, sir.
So with the top tier law schools, I mean, the reason that they're top tier is because the schools have developed the ability to filter students into high-paying, big firm jobs that, you know, put you all over the country, that have you doing a lot of high-stress, low-satisfaction kind of careers. That's the reason they're top-ranked. Lower-ranked schools, I think a lot of that list is going to be populated with a lot of regional schools where the jobs you're getting connect you to the community that you're from. The reason you went to that law school is to continue to work in that community, to do, you know, private family practice or to do anything, whereas the top-tier schools are putting, you know, students into pressure cookers where you're getting berated every day by partners and associates, because that's how the rankings work. So it's not surprising at all.
I do want to comment on that answer, but before commenting, I'd like to hear other people's views. Anyone else want to offer you? Yes.
I think slightly different than that. There's probably just more of a pressure at the top tier law schools to continue into job places of prestige, whatever that may mean. And that just like picking a job because it's prestigious may mean that you're overlooking whether it will actually make you happy and what you want out of a job.
On whom is the pressure to obtain a prestigious job?
Law students.
Law students.
Yeah.
Would you include yourself in that category? Okay. And do you all feel that way? Do you feel that there's a pressure on you to accept a so-called prestigious job? I see nods. That, of course, begs the question, what is a prestigious job? Well, we'll come to that. I just want to comment on your answer. I confess to agreeing with a large part of it, particularly the second half with respect to fourth-year graduates, and they are getting jobs in their community. That is true. They're not likely to end up in a large firm, for example. The first half of your answer was pretty rough. Perhaps significantly deserved, but I would comment that the U.S. News rankings do not reflect in the least whether a graduate of a law school is working for a large firm, whether they're working for a firm where they're making a lot of money or a little money, whether they're unhappy or happy. The only aspect of the U.S. News rankings that relates in any way to employment is whether a law student is employed in a as you put it, tenure-related job 7 months after graduation.
March 15th.
Yeah, March 15th of the succeeding year. And that is a U.S. News metric, but that's the only metric. The metrics should include whether recent law school graduates are professionally satisfied. That should be a U.S. News metric, but it is not a U.S. News metric. And by the way, if that were a metric, then that would be an important force motivating the career offices, in addition to helping you find a job, it would also be helping you find a job that you like, because it would be part of what goes into Berkeley and every other law school's rating. But it's not currently part of the metrics. Yes, sir.
Just to clarify, I mean, yes, but I mean, peer assessment is also a big part of the ranking, right?
Yes.
So
Peer assessment, which would not include what big firm lawyers think about, or other lawyers think. It would include what law professors and deans think about other law schools, but not folks who are out there in the marketplace.
Right. My only point being that like long-standing assumptions about what is like prestigious and what is good in a law career probably factor into, you know, how schools get ranked as well because of perception. But
I think that part is true, and that becomes somewhat circular, of course. But let me continue if I could. So I have a few more questions. Which one of the following factors in the work of the lawyer correlates least with higher reported levels of career satisfaction? Which factor correlates least? Okay. The degree to which the lawyer sees his or her work as contributing to the betterment of society, the latitude the lawyer has to make key decisions about the shape of work products and services, the amount of creative challenge his or her work affords, the frequency and quality of interactions in the lawyer's work, the lawyer's level of income. Which of those factors correlates least with higher reported levels of career satisfaction? Yes, sir.
It's the money.
It's the money. Right. The money correlates least, and maybe it's a little bit unfair since I've given you the answer, but I know this is a group bound by the honor code. How many of you would have answered it that way? How many of you would have said, I think ultimately money ends up being the least correlative? I see nods, and yes, that is correct. And going back to our first tier versus fourth tier dichotomy, folks who are graduating from fourth tier law schools presumably have the lowest chance of getting a highly paid job at least right away, whereas students graduating from first tier law schools would seem to have the highest chance of getting a highly paid job at least right away. Okay. Which order of types of law practice correspond to how satisfied lawyers are in each practice type they say with their careers? That was poorly read. Let me try that again. Which order of types of law practice corresponds to how satisfied lawyers in each practice type say they are with their careers? So there are three categories. Big firms is the first category. Second category is small firms and solo practice. And third category is public sector work. So who says that big firm graduates report the highest, lawyers report the highest level of career satisfaction? Please raise your hand. No hands raised. How many would say small firm and solo practice would be the highest? Quite a few hands. Probably not a majority. How many would say public sector work? I would say about the same as the last answer. Quite a few not voting. That's understandable. So the order is public sector work first, second small firm and solo practice, third big firm. This all kind of begs the question, what percent of you are headed to a big firm? Raise your hand, please, if you don't mind doing that. Okay. Maybe I should ask you to close your eyes and raise your hand. Okay. So 44% of big firm lawyers say they are satisfied with their career choice. And let me pause and note that that's 44% of lawyers who are currently working in big firms. It doesn't count the lawyers who went to work for a big firm, weren't satisfied, and left. They're out of the equation. And notice also that this is not what percent are very satisfied with their career choice. It's what percent are satisfied with their career choice. Okay, last question. What aspect of the actual practice of law most disappoints lawyers when compared to their expectations at the start of their careers? So this is kind of a hard question because it asks you to think about lawyers who are, let's say, about my age, and what you think we would say has most disappointed us about our practice compared with what we thought it would be like when we were in your chairs. Okay? So here are the 4 categories. Their level of financial remuneration, their pay. Second, the intellectual challenge of their job. Third, their ability to contribute to the public good. Fourth, the quality of their relationships with their colleagues. Which of those aspects of a lawyer's career do the highest number of lawyers say most disappoints them compared to what they thought it would end up being? Anybody want to take a guess at that? Want to hear the 4 again? Yes. Ms.
I think the
Tilden?
third one.
The third one, their ability to contribute to the public good. Who agrees? I see a lot of hands. That is the correct answer. Only 16% of lawyers say that their expectations were met with respect to their ability to contribute to the public good. That to me is very concerning. Very concerning. So what's the upshot from the answers to these 5 questions? The upshot is you're most likely to be happy if you work in a small place that has a public sector component, maybe not necessarily a public sector job, but a job where you can do something for the public good. The pay doesn't end up being reflective at all of how happy you'll be. And obviously, there's a caveat there, because you got to get beyond your student loans and avoid bankruptcy and all the other things that go along with that. But we get that. That human contact is essential in happiness all around in our lives, but especially including with respect to our work. And that what law school you went to is not only not predictive of how happy you will be, it's actually counterpredictive. The graduates of the lowest tiered schools end up being the happiest as a whole. There's probably a reason why the room is full, which is, and there's probably also a reason why you all kind of knew all these answers before I asked the questions, which is that you know this at some level. I mean, either you know it completely and explicitly, or you know it somehow deep down in your heart and in the pit of your stomach, which is why I made the comment about this talk not being compatible with eating lunch. But I want to suggest to you a perhaps alternative pathway to professional satisfaction for your consideration. Again, with this data in mind and with your own feeling about who you are and what you think makes you happy. So I would suggest essentially a 4-step, 4-part plan to getting a job that you'll really like. And the first step is to say to yourself, what do I like in the law? What classes and aspects of practice interest me? And how many of you are first-year students? Okay, that's quite a few. That's a majority. How many are second year? How many are third year? So even first-year students by second semester have some idea of what you like, or maybe you have some idea of what you don't like, but even that would give you some sort of a pathway. And you could pick 2 areas. You wouldn't have to pick just one. But say to yourself, what do I like? And then say to yourself, this is the second step. Where do I want to live? Do I want to live in the Bay Area? Do I want to live in Spokane, Washington? Do I want to live in Houston? Do I want to live in Miami? Do I live in a small town in Pennsylvania? Where do I want to live? I would suggest to you, by the way, that you have enormous leverage that I don't think you really appreciate, because you're students at one of America's finest law schools, and you're going to get an audience in a very high percentage of places that you contact. So, again, first step, what kind of work do I want to do? Second step, where I want to live. And then go about the business of researching the kinds of potential employers, the kinds of places, the places that might employ you in the area of law that most interests you, in the place where you most want to be. So, you know, I mean, some of you may want to be a trust and estates lawyer. I see head shakes that are negative, but this is just simply apocryphal right now, or hypothetical. you might want to be a trust and estates lawyer, and you might want to practice law in Spokane, Washington. Now, I would suggest to you that you could figure out with the use of your iPhone in probably about 15 minutes what likely are the 5 or 10 best places to practice trust and estates law in Spokane, Washington. It really is not that hard. You may have good reason for wanting to practice in that area. I mean, obviously somebody has to do it. And many of you, I should say, some of you might want to be in the Northwest. You might want to be in Spokane. And that's fine too. Melanie, how many trust and estates firms come onto the campus as part of on-campus interviewing from Spokane, Washington? 0.
Maybe from the Bay Area, but once you throw Spokane in there.
Okay. Okay. The answer is 0. Think about the enormous advantage that provides to you. If you want to work, if you want to do trust and estates work in Spokane, Washington, you're not going to be competing with, number 1, anybody in this room, number 2, anybody in this law school, number 3, maybe anybody in the Bay Area, or for that matter, hardly anybody on the west coast of the United States. Because I would venture to say the trust and estates firm in Spokane, Washington, don't do a whole lot of on-campus interviewing actually anywhere. Anywhere. Where are they getting their lawyers? Well, the same place that 99% of legal employers are getting their lawyers. That, by the way, is not the 1% that come onto this campus and the campus down the peninsula and the one across the bay and the other ones around the country. But I'm talking about the 99% that don't engage in on-campus interviewing. They hire people they know. They hire, their partner's kids, if that's their own sort of form of affirmative action. Right? That's really hiring people who look like you, right? When you hire your own children. I mean it completely seriously. I'm not proud of it. I'm not happy about it. It's just a fact. They're hiring people, if they're in litigation, who are across from them in a deposition room or across from them in a courtroom where they get to know and they sort of like. It's a matter of familiarity. And they don't really think of themselves as necessarily, quote, having openings, unquote. If they have work to do and they like somebody, they'll maybe offer them a job, and if they don't, they won't. They don't really have summer programs per se, but if they like somebody who's contacted them and they have a desk and they have work to do, they'll offer somebody a summer job. And if they look like a good lawyer to be during that experience, they will very often offer that person permanent employment. Because work tends to expand to fit the number of highly qualified people available to do the work, not the other way around. So if you like trust and estates work and you want to be in Spokane, you can get a job on your own there. You can't get it through the Career Services Office because those folks are not coming onto the campus, and it's too much to ask of Career Services, respectfully, to research trust and estates firms in Spokane and to have some sort of file on every area of law in every city and town across America. And ultimately, while the Career Office does a fantastic job on this campus, phenomenal job on this campus, it's not their job, and I mean this with the greatest respect to you, it's not their job to get you a job that you're going to like. That's your job. The only person who is going to really, really, at the end of the day, push you forward to get you a job that you're going to like is going to be you, or not. And if you don't do it, it won't happen. It just ends up being as simple as that. So once you've identified the potential employers in the area of law that you think you might want to go into, in the place where you might want to work, you then need to write them letters. And notice I said letters. I didn't say send them emails. Because first, I'm a potential employer, by the way. I'm the co-founding partner of a 46-lawyer firm in Philadelphia. And I don't tend to open emails from addresses that I don't know, because I've been told by my tech guy I shouldn't be doing that. And so I don't even know if I'm missing some things that I probably should be seeing. number one. I do tend to send these emails to the tech person to open it for me or not open it as he sees fit, but I think things get lost that way. And also I think the spam folder probably captures a lot of stuff. And who knows what I'm not seeing that I probably should be seeing. On the other hand, I get absolutely no mail. I get no mail. I get, an occasional magazine, professional magazine, or an advertising circular, or if you want to call it junk mail, that sort of stuff. But I get almost no real letters from hardly anyone ever. That's maybe a little bit of an exaggeration. I get a fair number, I'd say 1 a week, letters from inmates asking me to represent them. I read those letters. I take them very seriously. But I don't get letters very often from law students or from lawyers looking for a job. Even though I'm the co-founding partner of a very substantial firm in Philadelphia and probably a pretty good place to work. Why? Because nearly every law student across America pretty much goes to career services to get their job, either directly through on-campus interviewing or through the resources that career services provides, but they're not seeing the other potential employers that exist across the country. If I get a letter or an email, because I'm not so picky about the way in which the letter comes to me that I wouldn't open it and be responsive, but if I would get a letter or an email from a law student in a top-tier law school, and I can see that I care what law school an applicant comes from, it's important to me, along with other things that are important. I care about grades, and I care about the resume, I care about jobs, I care about a lot of things. But if I get a contact from a top-tier law student, I look at it, and I look at it carefully. And from some law schools, I would say that there would be a presumption that I would offer a summer position to somebody that contacted me directly. Because I get so few of the contacts, because I admire the initiative, and because I think what law school somebody goes to is relevant as to how they'll do outside of law school. Predictive may be slightly strong, but it's relevant. So I think the pathway is absolutely there for you to get a job you'll really like by following that 4-step plan. This is not the first time I've given this talk. I've given this talk at Berkeley many times. I've given this talk, in this academic year, I've given this talk, I think, 6 times, 7 times at various law schools, including down at Stanford, including at Hastings, including in Philadelphia at Penn. I gave the talk 3 times at Temple Beasley because they kept asking me to come back and give it again to more and more students. And I know from years of giving this talk, this absolutely works. It absolutely works as a formula for getting a job you really like. Let me offer a couple other observations for you to think about. First, I would try to split my summers. You only have 2 summers. If you had 40 summers during law school, I think it'd be fine to work in one firm for the summer, but you don't. You only have 2. And that means you only have perhaps the chance to have 2 or 3 or 4 potential experiences. I think having a variety of experiences is very important. I know that the big firms don't want you to split your summers. I know that, I get that. By the way, it wasn't that way when I was in your position. And I know it seems like it must have been a very long time ago, but not everything was that different back then. Well, one reason why I would suggest to you, with the greatest respect to big firms, that they don't want you to do that is because they have figured out that if they let you split your summer, they're dividing by 2 their chance of getting you to come to work there on a permanent basis. Right? Because if you have 2 experiences and you're going to choose from one of those 2, there's one chance in 2, approximately, that are going to lose you to someplace else. I would also suggest to you that if a potential employer, bless you, is discouraging you from getting other experiences, that might say something to you about whether you want to go work there. That does not make me feel good about that potential employer. They should care about you, not just about themselves, about them being willing to have your decision be based upon many experiences, not just one or two experiences. Beyond that, it's a lot easier for you to get a summer job in any place but a big firm if you're only saying to that place, hey, I'm only asking to work here, 6 to 8 weeks. I'm not asking you to commit to me for 12 or 14 or 16 weeks. Because after all, that hypothetical trust and estates firm in Spokane, Washington, they probably would be just as happy to not to have to employ you for, or at least commit to employ you for 3 months. Probably it would be sufficient for their purposes to employ you for 6 or 8 weeks. And for you, you don't need 12 or 14 weeks in a firm or some other potential employer for you to know whether that's a good place for you. You'll know that well before that period of time. In fact, even before 6 or 8 weeks, you'd know. You'd know a lot of places within a week, or some places within an hour. Okay? You know what I'm talking about. So, use your leverage. You've got tremendous leverage. You're Berkeley law students, oh my goodness. I'm really serious about that. This is maybe the first time, especially for those of you who are first years, maybe the first time in your life you've ever had leverage. I mean it completely seriously. I know it's kind of funny, but I mean it completely seriously. You have enormous leverage. There are so few people who've gotten this far. And people are, impressed by Berkeley. They should be impressed by Berkeley. So I suggest that you go ahead and you utilize that and try to generate for yourself a bunch of potential offers. Some people you could write to and ask for an informational interview. Some folks you could write to and ask for a job. I wouldn't be worried about whether you did one versus the other. It's very easy for you to cause an informational interview to morph into a job interview. I think you know how to do that, but in case you don't, I think it's easy for you to say, thanks for all the information about this area of practice and about this firm and about this town and other places I might be able to get a job. By the way, do you have anything available in the summer for me? And I think that's a pretty easy thing to say after 15 minutes or so of talking to someone. Beyond that, I think it's fine for you to do these interviews by FaceTime. I don't suggest getting on an airplane and going to Spokane to interview at trust and estates firms. I would not accept permanent employment based upon a FaceTime interview, but for a 6-week or 8-week summer job, I think it's absolutely fine to accept it based upon a FaceTime interview. And I hire a lot of summer law clerks, summer associates in our firm based upon a FaceTime interview, because I know there's someplace else. I'm not going to make them show up in my office just for the sake of having them there. Again, though, I would not hire somebody permanently based upon a FaceTime interview. But a 6-week job is an interview. It's your interview of them and their interview of you. Now, you're probably thinking to yourself, or some of you are, first of all, this is really easy for him to say. He doesn't have $175,000 in student debt, or even more, laying behind him. But for those of you who have debt, substantial debt, I want to give you a couple of thoughts on that. I know that money is kind of like, we're talking about money. I sort of get that. But you'd be surprised about this issue of prestige. Prestige is often, sort of code for money, right? And I know that the big firms offer what appear to be enticing starting salaries for first-year associates. Query, how much will that increase year to year, and query whether excellent work will permit you to accelerate your income commensurate with the excellence of your work, or whether you'll get just pushed along with everybody else in your class because politically it's not possible to pay one excellent third-year associate any different than what other third-year associates are being paid in that firm. And I see nods, and I think you know what I'm talking about. At that trust and estates firm in Spokane, I could nearly guarantee you that they will not pay you a starting salary that'll be the same as what you'd make at one of those fancy firms in downtown San Francisco. I get that. But I also get that living any place in the Bay Area such that you can work in downtown San Francisco is enormously expensive. And it's its own form of a tax. And you can take that, some big chunk of that $180,000 a year that they'll pay you as a first-year associate of one of those firms, and you can just devote it to the delta between living in the Bay Area versus the delta of living in Spokane, or someplace like Spokane. And when you go and talk to a firm in Spokane, again, apocryphal Spokane, you know, you can say to them, look, thanks for the job offer. And thanks for the offer of the income that you've just described to me, but I can't make it on that amount. I have loans to repay. Here's how much I have to repay. Here's going to be what I'm going to have to pay per month to do that. If they want you, they're going to do what they need to do in order to get you. And if you're excellent, you're going to come along with increases in income that are going to be well above, at least on a percentage basis, what you might expect in a large place. And if you're not happy with how they're treating you, either economically or otherwise, you will have acquired a transferable and marketable set of skills because you're in a small place where you're doing a lot more varied and important things just by necessity, as opposed to being kind of the 8th person on a 7-person team, which is the life of a lot of young lawyers working in very large firms, where you're respectfully learning relatively few transferable and marketable skills. So that if you don't like how it's working out at that firm in Spokane, but you know you're good at your job, you can go sideways in Spokane, or open your own firm and practice trust and estates work, and then probably really make a killing, because you're so smart, in part because you went here, and you were smart enough to figure out how to get a job you really like, where you could excel. You know, I've hired a lot of people out of big firms. I could mention the names of the firms, you'd know them. Why? Because of their aptitude. Because they did well in law school and they went to a good law school. I didn't hire them because of their experience in the big firms. When somebody comes to see me and they're a 5th-year associate at a large firm, and I have a trial firm, and they haven't tried a case, or second-tiered a case, or third-tiered a case, or really ever been in a courtroom with a jury, and they've you know, taken a couple of depositions of lower-level folks that didn't require any real imagination, and they've done legal writing, which of course you learn how to do in law school. You don't need to be a lawyer necessarily to do that. And they've done document review, which you don't have to be even a lawyer to do. And so I'm not hiring them for their skills that they developed in a law firm. They haven't developed any transferable and marketable skills, at least not for me. But I'm hiring them because I think they're smart and I like their personality. I think they'll do okay, or maybe better than okay, in our firm or a firm like ours. So it's concerning to me that you might go to work someplace where you make a very high starting salary, where you think in advance you're not going to be happy, and then you're going to turn around in 2 or 3 years and want to go someplace else, and then you're going to run into a roadblock because people like me are going to say, geez, I would really rather hire an assistant DA or a public defender who has done stuff that I really need. They know how to question a witness, they know how to try a case. And you don't really know how to do that because you haven't learned that in your firm. I know it's kind of depressing, some of this stuff. I know that. But I think that on all of this counts, on the count of having a rewarding experience, on the count of earning money. I can see the first year won't be the same at the same level, but down the road it will be at the same, and I would suggest quite a bit more, particularly if you end up running your own place or being an equity partner, a real equity partner. I'm not talking about having a 0.1% share in the firm. I'm talking about having a real share in a firm, which comes with being in a firm that's small. And then, of course, going back to the answers to these questions, being in a place where you are working with people with real problems, where you have some component of your practice and your professional life that involves making a contribution to the public good. I think you're going to find that you're going to check every box that you care about. Every box that you care about sitting right here. So one more comment, and I'll take any questions that you might have. Ann Bloom is here, and Ann runs something called the Civil Justice Research Initiative. Did I get that pretty much correct?
Yeah.
Okay. And Ann is in what room now?
459, the
And-
law building.
And Ann is a great resource for you in terms of a sense of places where you might be able to get a job that folks that don't come here to the law school, folks maybe that do plaintiff's work or public interest work or some combination, places that may be smaller, places that would probably provide you with a more rewarding experience both for the summer and otherwise. I'm also available to you. I'm available to you whether you're in my evidence class or whether you're not in my evidence class. I care deeply about all of you, very, very deeply about all of you. I'm very concerned about you're getting a job that you'll be happy with and having a rewarding career at the bar. It just eats away at me, the idea that you might not be happy. So I don't even know my Berkeley law address. Maybe my law students know my Berkeley law address, but do you know my Berkeley law address?
I don't remember it.
Okay.
No, Diane,
They can find it.
Okay, well, what do you think of this, Melanie?
I think it's S Spectre, but it's with an E-E-R
Yeah.
at the end, and also if you just type in Shannon, S-H-A-N-I-N, it'll auto-populate.
Okay. I guess you'll need the rest of the address, did you? Okay. Any questions? Comments? Critiques?
I've got a question. When we're talking about quality of life as a junior associate at a law firm, I've noticed in my interactions with a small number of partners that they don't seem to care much about the quality of life of the most junior associates at a firm. And I wonder, is your advice to avoid those firms or to somehow approach those, advocate for yourself with those more senior people in a certain way to make your life a little better? How do you deal with that?
I mean, I would not want to work any place where people don't care about me. It seems so fundamental. The question to me answers itself. And I don't think you're going to be able to successfully advocate for yourself. If they don't care about you, they're not going to care about what you just said. It's sort of self-proving. I'm sorry the question's even asked. I mean, I'm not criticizing you for asking it. It's just distressing to me that we would be at that place, that we'd have to ask a question like that people wouldn't care about whether the folks that work for them are happy. I can tell you this, running a small firm, I have to care enormously about the happiness of the lawyers that work in my firm. Because if people aren't happy, I'm convinced they're going to leave. And continuity in a law firm is critically important. I mean, it is so important. But if I were running a 3,000 lawyer firm, I mean, just divorcing it for a second from my own feelings about what responsibilities you have when you run a place, but just in terms of like the nuts and bolts of making money and stuff like that, yeah, it's true. I wouldn't care that much about it in terms of making money, because whether you leave and whether the woman next to you leaves and the fellow across the hall for you leaves, okay, if 3 lawyers leave, we've got 3,000 lawyers, who cares? Right? It's 1/10 of 1% of our lawyers. If 3 lawyers at Klein and Spector leave, it's a law firm of 46 lawyers, okay, that feels like it's going to be earth-shattering in the firm. People are going to start saying, well, maybe I should leave too. And I don't want to have lawyers walking out of my firm. That's bad for business. So I care enormously about whether people are happy in their jobs. And that also fits into the kinds of cases that I take. I worry about taking on professional matters where I'm concerned that whether our lawyers are going to like the matters. Because again, if they don't like what they're working on, that's another thing that might propel them out the door. I think if I'm running a 3,000 lawyer office, my issue on what kind of work we're going to take is what kind of work is going to pay the light bill, and pay the associate salaries, and pay the partners' salaries and the like. And I'm not going to be as concerned about whether people are going to be happy about their representations. Other questions? Yes, sir.
What would you say has been the most fulfilling part of your career?
my job is great, first of all. So I have so many things about my job that are great, and I'll kind of tick them off for you. I'm a plaintiff's lawyer. I represent people who are catastrophically injured. So first of all, I get to pick the cases that I want to take. I don't get any assignments from insurance companies or big companies because I work for who I want to work for. And that feels really good, to be able to take on matters that I want to take on. It feels tough sometimes to say no to people, but a lot of cases, you know, in the tort field, they lack one of 5 elements. Remember from torts class, you know, there's duty. Remember there's duty and breach and causation and damages. You got to have all 4 of those to make out a tort case. But to make out a successful tort case, you also have to have insurance or assets to pay claim. So almost all cases fail to check off, you know, almost all cases fail to check at least 1 or more of these 5 boxes. So I end up taking a small percentage of matters that come to me, but you know, to take on a matter for somebody who's very badly injured or loved ones who've lost a wage earner or someone else in the family to a wrongful death is a great professional challenge. And then you know, in a fair number of the cases that I take on, I, with client consent, decline to settle the case for whatever is being offered unless the defendant takes remedial action to correct their behavior that gave rise to what caused the injury. Not a majority of cases. An ordinary, you know, car accident case or a slip and fall would not be that kind of a case, but a company, a hospital, for example, that needs to change its policies, or a police department that needs to change its policies, you know, we do that. That makes me feel really good, really good. The money all gets spent, folks, seriously. It all gets spent someplace in some way. What really sticks to your ribs as a lawyer is the stuff that you did that make people's lives better. And if you can not only help your client, but also others in the community, not to mention the country, that's really, really psychically very rewarding. And that's a big part of what Ann does in her initiative, is to try to take on impact litigation and try to help lawyers do exactly that. So that's a second thing. A third thing is no timesheets, okay? Just being honest with you, no timesheets, because we don't work on an hourly basis. We bill a percentage of the recovery in the case. And you know, most plaintiffs' lawyers really struggle. I'm not going to kid you. It's a tough area of practice. It's probably per plaintiff's lawyer across the board much less lucrative than being, let's say, working for a big firm. I completely get that. But it's also true that a lot of the best work flows to those firms in the community that are seen as doing the best job. So it can be rewarding financially. There's that aspect of it. And it's always different. You know, every case that I have is a little bit different from other cases, or much more than different from other cases. And so there's nothing about it that's repetitive or monotonous. So sorry for the long answer, but I'm not here today to talk about the plaintiff's practice. I'm here to talk about you getting a job that you really like. But you know, part of it is the job that I got when I was a law student, when I was in March, literally March of my first year, I said to a lawyer that I respected, you know, tell me where I should go to work my first summer. And he said to me, well, find a really good lawyer to work for the summer. And I said, oh, well, we have a career services office, and they've got a list of the really good firms. And he said, I didn't tell you to go work for a really good firm, because there are mediocre lawyers in really good firms, and there are really good lawyers in mediocre firms. I told you to find a good lawyer to work for. And I said, okay, well, who are these good lawyers? He gave me a list of 12, and I wrote 12 letters. We can have email them, embarrassing to say. And I got 3 offers and took one of them and ended up in a plaintiff's practice for the summer, really liked it, and ended up in that firm. And, you know, it worked out well for me. But that firm, I mean, you know, Jim Beasley would never go to Penn for any reason, you know, which is where I went to law school. He would never set foot on the campus to interview law students. It was a 12-lawyer firm. He ended up later endowing Temple University's law school. Now bears his name. He had tremendous public interest and made great contributions to the community good in Philadelphia, but he was not going to find his way to anybody like you or me. I had to find my way to him. Is your head in the air?
Oh yeah, I have
Yes.
a question.
Yes.
How do you, I would be curious to hear how you think about balancing long-term goals with present satisfaction. Because I think a lot of people in here who have done well in school in the past have been trained to study in the present for a future payoff of a grade. And I think that the draw to a lot of prestigious firms is perhaps driven by people thinking, okay, I'm not gonna love this, I'm gonna be here for a little while, and then I'm gonna be able to leave and sort of keep my optionality and maybe figure out what I wanna do later.
Okay, I reject the idea that you should take a job in a place that you know going into it you're gonna be unhappy. I just reject it. You shouldn't have to do that. That's not a trade-off that you should have to make. But if you were to do it, against my advice, it would have to be someplace where you're going to learn transferable and marketable skills so that when you decide to leave, you can go someplace really good. And I'm concerned about being able to do that in a big place. I do think that there are some opportunities to negotiate an arrangement at a big place. It's possible where you could go into a small practice group in a big place and have a really rewarding experience where the work would be somewhat similar to what I'm talking about in terms of being in a small place, where you're working with a small group of lawyers in just a niche of that firm in one particular city on one particular kind of set of matters. I think that could be very good. Although there, I am concerned about whether your income is going to keep pace with how excellent you really are. So, do I think it's possible? Yeah, but really tough to do it. But I just categorically don't accept the idea of taking a job someplace that you know in advance you're not going to be happy. Any other questions? I know we're stopping at 2. Okay. Thank you very much. I'm available to you.